some members on both sides of the aisle are angry that the president did not get approval for these strikes. Joining us is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He also served in the Air Force during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Congressman, thank you for being with us. You have long supported military action in Syria. You lobbied for President Obama to take action in 2013. I take it you're among those who support these latest strikes.
Yeah, this was absolutely the right thing to do. I actually think we need a broader strategy in Syria, but given the fact that we haven't really had a strategy in Syria since the beginning of this conflict, at least holding that chemical weapons have no place in the Western world or in any world and on any battlefield is a good start. So the president did the right thing. For those that are in Congress that say the president should have come to Congress for this, look, it's a legitimate position, but the Constitution is clear that our role in Congress is to declare if a state of war exists, which we didn't declare yesterday, and it's to give the financial means to the military to do what they need to do. The president is the commander-in-chief, and there are a lot of members of Congress and senators that want to think of themselves as president. They look in the mirror every morning and go, hello, Mr. Future President, but that doesn't mean that there's 535 commanders-in-chief. And so I think the president was right to act without Congress's consent yesterday. If we go into putting 100 or 200,000 troops in Syria or we go to war, then absolutely he needs to come to Congress for that.
The question is, what happens now? Do you think these strikes will have a different result than the one last year?
Well, I think the one last year was effective. We saw basically the regime think twice about using sarin until recently. And so hopefully they are more powerful. But here's what the message is. The message is the cost of using chemical weapons will far exceed any benefit you gain. So this did multiple things. Number one, it sent a very strong message. Don't use any more chemical weapons. The other thing it did is it showed the Russians that despite all their bluster, frankly, there's not a whole lot they can do, or they would be smart to not really retaliate against the U.S. military. We outpower them. The Russian military is actually fairly ineffective, and Russia is a declining economy. While we have to respect the fact that they're a great power, they're not the old Soviet Union. And it also sent a message to Iran, which is the United States is not going to turn our backs to what's going on in Syria, especially when it comes to tragedies like the use of chemical weapons.
What makes you so confident that this round of strikes will be a deterrent when obviously the last round of airstrikes wasn't a deterrent, because here we are in the situation we see today?
Well, I can't say I know for sure. I'm not Vladimir Putin and I'm not Bashar al-Assad. What I can say is I think the president's made it clear that if chemical weapons are used even yet again, there will be another round of strikes. And the point is, in that calculus, it's saying you use chemical weapons, the cost to your regime is much higher than any benefit you're going to gain. And beyond that, it sends a strong message, whether it's to North Korea or any other future despot that decides that chemical weapons is going to have a place in his arsenal, that we are not going to stand for that. So this is important, not just for what's going on in Syria, but for upholding international norms and this convention for future generations, including grandkids and great-grandkids from now.
When you look at the future, you talked about the lack of strategy. Do you believe that it's important for this president to lay out a clear strategy in Syria? Because just a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about completely getting out of Syria.
I do believe it's important. I wish the last president would have done it, and I wish this president would do it. Now, I think this war has progressed far enough that intervention by the United States military is no longer a real option, but I think forcing the table, going to this UN brokered peace process, coming to a conclusion where all parties have a seat at the table, and I also think it means Bashar al-Assad needs out of power. I don't see how people reconcile under this man whose grandfather killed so many people, or whose father killed so many people, and he killed 500,000. It will be a UN brokered process at this point, but there needs to be a strategy which includes cutting off Iran's access to the border of Israel too, because that's a huge flashpoint that I think could lead to some big problems.
Now, as you know, Russia has said the alleged chemical attack 1 week ago was staged. They've condemned these airstrikes. Russia continues to put out information that counters what U.S. officials say happened. Listen to what we heard from Nikki Haley earlier today.
We can all see that a Russian disinformation campaign is in full force this morning. But Russia's desperate attempts at deflection cannot change the facts. The pictures of dead children were not fake news. They were the result of the Syrian regime's barbaric inhumanity.
You heard Haley use the term fake news. Is this point in case why facts matter? And does the Trump administration's pattern of dishonesty risk questioning by the international community about who is telling the truth and what to believe?
This is a very different thing from a political disagreement or a disagreement with what's happening domestically with the Russians through their FSB agents, and frankly, through some of the conspiracy theorists that you see in the media here, basically on blogs and stuff, that are claiming this is some kind of a false flag operation. I don't believe anything Vladimir Putin says, to be honest with you. And this idea that anybody that calls themselves an American would believe that British special forces did a chemical attack for an impetus into war, if you actually believe that, please look in the mirror and look at your allegiance to your country, because I'm going to tell you what, this was not a false flag operation, and quit listening to what these Russian trolls on the internet and Twitter are telling you every day. That's real fake news, and Americans need to push back on it and be smarter than that.
How important is it for this administration, too, to make sure they get their facts straight every time?
Well, I'm always a big fan of truth, and especially when it comes to, well, everything, but when it comes to issues of international affairs, international relations, this is essential. I think Americans can have massive political disagreements. We always have, and frankly, we're at a pretty divided time right now, and this is going to continue. But when it comes to overseas, when it comes to passing the water's edge, we've got to be united as Americans, and I hope we can do this. Like, as you mentioned in the intro, I was very supportive of President Obama in 2013 attacking Syria. I was upset when he didn't, but I was willing to back a Democratic president because it was the right thing to do, and I put partisanship aside.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you so much for coming on.